that Enrique Norten faces. This isn't necessarily a representation that he thinks of these issues in this way, but I thought I would suggest a number of the tensions that exist in the life and in the work and in the mind of an architect who is an international architect in a generic sense and also belongs to a particular life in a particular location in a particular culture and has something of an obligation to re-represent or to deliver those issues in his work. Can I have that first? So I came to the conclusion that there are probably 4 Enrique Nortens. So this isn't schizophrenia. This is the 4-part personality. This is. Do you know? No? Yeah. So this is Cuauhtémoc, who was the emperor, not who followed Moctezuma, but the emperor who followed the emperor who followed Moctezuma, and who was particularly well known, and there are a number of paintings that show how he was tortured and his feet were burned by the Spanish, but his symbol or his instinct was abject resistance and resistance to Spain. So maybe this is personality number 1 or obligation number 1. Next one, por favor. This is Siqueiros. And I actually remember this because my parents had a piece of this on the wall in their home for many years. And it has to do with the difficulty of defining what constitutes Mexican. And this intersection of Indian and Anglo without a melding of the two. So this would be the second tension. Next, please. This is a more extroverted discourse. Rivera and Orozco and Siqueiros, for a number of years, the heroes of Mexican contemporary architecture, dealing with the question of money, of capital, of exploitation, of war, of death, of destruction, all of those in an enormously complex way. So it has to do with a resistance to money and to business, I think, in a sense of trying to discover in the Mexican soul something which is endemic to that and exists in opposition to the European way. Next. And this is, of course, Frida Kahlo with a very different sense, a personal sense, idiosyncratic sense, poignant sense of pain, but pain as an individual, I think, in an extremely poignant way. This would be another tension that I think Enrique has to face. Next. And then part of a continuum of Mexican modernism, which obviously has linkages to Europe and to America. Next, please. Barragán in the Church for Carmelite Nuns. So these are the 4 personalities that I think may be interspersed in Enrique's work. So please welcome Enrique Norten, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
good evening. Eric, thank you very much for this introduction. I think you already said all I had to say. So. But I must say that, first of all, I'm very, very, very happy to be back at SCI-Arc. I think I probably haven't been here at least for 10 years. And well, time goes very fast. And certainly last time I was at SCI-Arc was still when SCI-Arc was at Marina del Rey. And I must admit I didn't even know this building. So it's really great. For me, it's very special to be back at a school that has always been very close to my heart. And it's great to see Michael Rotondi and Eric and all of those friends from all those old times at SCI-Arc. And it's wonderful to see again SCI-Arc doing so well. So for me, it's a great privilege to be able to share this talk with you. And well, as we went, I will show you basically a series. Tonight I will show you a series both of built projects and some projects that are unbuilt or that we're working on, some projects that will not be built. I like to start always, especially when I come to California, my talks with this map, because I'm not sure if all of you know where Mexico is. But you should know, that's, as Eric just explained, that's where I am from, that's where I grew up, that's where I've developed most of my practice. And as you see in this map, Mexico is the center of the world. For those of you who know where it is. And obviously Mexico is a very plural condition. Eric's referring to me probably said there's sort of like a intersection of four personalities. The cartoon on your right probably tries to explain that there's Mexico is sort of an intersection of many more than four personalities. It's a very complex condition, and the complexity of Mexico as a country, as a culture, which is obviously and definitely my origin, really comes together in a fabulous phenomena, which is Mexico City. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I went to school in Mexico City for most of my education. And that's where I founded our office. Mexico City is part of this continuum of the contemporary city, which I believe has created a new network, a new condition of networks in the contemporary world. And to me, the city, and drawing especially from Mexico City, has probably been one of my most important sources of energy to understand at least the work that we are doing and that we have been doing. Mexico City was founded as a very modern city, as an ultimately pluricentric modern city, almost 700 years ago. Really almost 600 years ago. And it has developed into to me, one of the most fascinating cities in the world that probably represents both the beauty and the challenges of the future of our urban life. Our office is in Mexico City, and most of our build work so far is also in Mexico City. Eric has very peculiarly described four personalities, probably, maybe of mine, but probably of our work. And I have always, and I should say that now, after 25 years almost 25 years of practicing architecture, and looking sort of retrospectively back at our work, it's always great to come to a certain age that allows you to look back at what you have done, and then gives you a perspective or a possibility to try to foresee what you want to do in the very few years that we have left, or the whatever years that we have left. But I have always seen or I have begun to see my work always as a body of work that sits in sort of a confluence of several contradictions. Eric has mentioned some of them, and I'm going to go very fast through some of these early projects. You've seen most of them. You've seen them either at, some of you have come to me and said you've seen me lecture before, or you've seen them probably in various publications. So I'm just going to use it as a backdrop as I tell you a little bit of this sort of retrospective reflection. So as I said, I see our work as always sitting in this condition of fragile equilibrium in an intersection of various contradictions. Eric probably touched on one of them, and obviously it is very important, and it is this condition where we try to understand the relationship between the universal and the specific. We all live in this very complex network. I hate to use the word global, but maybe we don't have many other words to describe this sort of world phenomena that we're all living, where, especially for architecture or for culture and the arts, there has been a vocabulary, I would say a universal vocabulary that we've drawn out of what we call modernism, that we all speak to, that we all understand, that we all relate to. And there's also developed, I would say, a universal discourse around architecture where we all of us sort of take part of. So being part of that discourse has been an important part of our development. But at the same time, it has been very important to us to understand and recognize the particularities and the specifics of each one of our projects and each one of the places where we had an opportunity to develop our work. As we know also, and this is a condition of our universal situation, the more global we become, at the same time, the need to recognize the uniqueness of both the culture and the places has become stronger and stronger. And I think that that's really what differentiates our generation of architects from the various generations of modern architects that preceded us. I think that's what that has created a palette that distinguishes our work from the work of my colleagues, of my same generation. And that has been, finding that equilibrium has been an issue of great interest to me. But also, there are other conditions. Through these years, I have also, now that I look back, tried to understand what we call the tectonics of architecture. What are the materials of architecture? What are the construction methods of architecture in each one of the specific places where we get to do our work? What are the real forces, the vital forces of which one of the places? And by that, I mean not only, of course, the physical conditions or the climatic conditions, but I also very strongly try to relate to the economics, to the politics, to the sociocultural relationships that somehow define and determine the architecture that we have been able to do, and that distinguishes it from architecture probably done elsewhere. Most of this work has been sort of circling around a lot of this investigation, and that it has allowed us to somehow decant probably a vocabulary that, although it has not been a conscious decision or a conscious line of research, it has become part of a way of expression that has allowed us to relate both to the places and to the people and to the culture, and of course, ultimately, to the people that trust us and give us the opportunity, the institutions that give us those opportunities to design and to build these pieces of architecture for them. Now, I should also say that as our development has gone on, there has been probably a third condition, or condition or contradiction, I would say, that has become more and more apparent to me. And although probably it has been there for a while, it didn't really raise until, I would say, some of the latest years of our career. And this has been sort of trying to understand the relationship or the intersection between what I tend to call, or we all want to call, the materiality of architecture versus the immateriality of architecture. I think that it comes to a point that we sort of had been able to manage sort of the logistics of the guild, understood and learned how to build. And then suddenly it becomes more and more apparent that the poetics of our profession not always lie on that, although they do also, but there is what I like to call the immaterial conditions of architecture, which deal not only with light, but deal with many other probably undescribable conditions, because these are conditions that do not occupy a place in space. But they are, at the end, opportunities and elements that define the architectural profession and that have more and more become part of the magic or the poetics of our discipline. And having said that, I will cut with all of that bullshit, as they say here, and go into showing you some projects. At the end, I think it's very important to show the projects. I strongly believe, I became an architect, and I always say that because I love to build. I strongly believe that architecture exists at the moment of construction. That's that's the most important aesthetic moment of architecture. And more I'm fascinated with the possibility of building these projects. And more I believe that what we do is geared towards that ultimate opportunity and experience. This is a very small project, well, I would say a small project that we did in Mexico City. As you see here, right is how it is now, left is how it was before. So we were asked to take this existing apartment building in I would say, a very busy intersection in Mexico City and transform it in what we tend to call now a boutique hotel. I'm staying now at the Standard Hotel, which you probably all know, and it's very interesting because when I stay at the Standard here in Los Angeles, they treat me very well because they know I designed this hotel in Mexico City, which is sort of like some little bit of a precedent to this kind of hotels that have been emerging in various parts of this country and of the world. Here, although the conditions were very different, here we had a existing modern building. As you may all know, I'm sure many of you that have visited Mexico City know, Mexico City is a very modern city. It's a city not only that was founded as a modern city, as I said before, but that really embraced modernity with great passion. And we have wonderful examples and a lot of modern architecture. So for us, sort of like working within conditions of modern architecture has become a little bit of a tradition. This is probably a not special modern building that we encountered that had to go through very, very serious transformation. The first thing is that we could not tear it down, basically for zoning issues that I don't want to get into because they become a little bit complicated, but we had to keep the structure in order to be able to accommodate as much square footage or cubic footage as the client wanted into this site. Therefore, we really couldn't do much because at the same time we had to upgrade the structure to meet with the new structural codes. As you know, like in Los Angeles, Mexico City sits in a extremely seismic condition. And as you know, every time there is a new earthquake, the codes get upgraded. So this building having been built in the first half of the 20th century, by the time we got to it, we had to do a lot of sort of structural upgrading to the building, which was a very sort of surgical condition. We couldn't do much to it, but we had to be very precise, get into it. And that brought with it many, many issues. First is that we had, the most important problems that we had is that we had to make this building into a boutique hotel on a very noisy intersection. So first of all, there was a noise issue. Second of all, there was a view issue because the views from the existing future rooms were really very, very contaminated. And very especially, there was also a very important mechanical issue, which is that we could not, because the floor to ceiling heights were very restricted and we couldn't touch that, we couldn't get in with any kind of mechanical systems. So then we had to, and that's where the solution to this building comes. By understanding all of those issues, we came with this opportunity where we would wrap the existing building basically in a new translucent wrapper. And that wrapper would create and would resolve all of those issues that I spoke about. It would create an acoustical buffer, it would create a thermal buffer, and it would also help us define the new views without separating us from the surrounding context. And that's where we started, we sort of brought all of those expenses that should have had to go into restoring the building, we brought it out into a new skin, and the new skin would resolve many of those issues. Another very important condition is that this building was sort of sitting a little bit outside of the trendy areas, I would say, of Mexico City. So the opportunity to make this little building into an icon for this new area was a very exciting one. I have been very proud to see how this building has been so successful, but not only for the building and for the client itself, but also for what it's done to the immediate surroundings. And it's quite amazing, quite interesting to see how very, very precise interventions, very small but focused interventions in big cities like Los Angeles or like Mexico City can go so far as to start sort of spilling into the surrounding conditions. And this building, by becoming this sort of lit lamp every night, has started generating a very interesting new life in the surrounding vicinity. And I know that some of you have been to these buildings and won't let me lie about it. I am very interested in the condition of light, and light not only as daylight, but also the possibilities of artificial lighting, and how light can really transform and reinvent the different conditions of spaces. And by light, I don't mean only the quantity of light, I'm sorry, but I really mean more the quality and a very wide palette of light conditions. And by that, we may understand opacities and translucencies and transparencies, of course, and reflections, etc., etc. And a lot of this project was about investigating how, like sort of the extent of that palette in this condition. Here you can see, in these photos, you can see two of the sort of interstitial situations that get generated by the addition of the new skin, and how those unprogrammed spaces, and that's, I think, another ongoing theme in our work, get a life of their own. and become a very integral part of the understanding of the architecture. Here you can see two views from different rooms. And as I was saying a moment ago, we took the opportunity of the second wrapper also to sort of destroy the overall Unitarian picture we had of the surrounding context, and just picked up little moments, like little tiny moments that could relate us to the context and give us this continuity between inside and outside, and then reinvent with we were giving, like sort of like found art in the outside, reinvent the pictures or reinvent the paintings we wanted sort of to show from within the rooms. And that creates quite an interesting screen that not only controls the light, but also controls the views. And of course, as I said before, the temperature, the sound, and many other issues. So that's really where the whole idea of this double wrapper comes from. Another opportunity we had here was that because of the conditions of the existing building, we realized very soon that we didn't have an opportunity to insert in the bottom, as traditionally is done, the public spaces of the hotel. And that happened especially because the ground floor was occupied by parking for the apartment building, so it was a very, very shallow condition. So we decided to bring up all of the public spaces of the hotel to the roof, to the non-utilized roof of the hotel. And this is where I relate to what happened here in the standard that came much after we did that. And it was about understanding that the roof views, the views of the roof, the temperature of the roof, the conditions of the air at the roof in our cities brought a totally new opportunity that was completely underutilized. So we decided to build at the roof the pool, the bars, the lounges, all of those spaces where I would say the gathering of people, the party, the fun, the encounters happen. And it's become one of the most popular, I would say, public-private spaces in our city. And here are some views of it. These are my children. And this leads me to the next project. This is a new project that we built in a city, in a small town, I would say, called Zapopan in the state of Jalisco, which is right just outside of Guadalajara. Here we were asked to design the sports facilities for an existing sort of private high school, like a prep school. The prep school, the school sits to the left of the plan, and it's sort of like a very older school with a very, very different vocabulary. Eventually, the school bought this back part where there used to be some very old adobe warehouses, probably 100, 150 years old. At the beginning, we thought we could use a little bit of that. Very soon, we realized structurally it was just impossible to do anything with that. But we decided anyways that we would use the existing floor plan of those structures there and use it as sort of like as a master plan for the new facilities. And that explains a little bit the strange geometry in relation to the location of this project to the whole site. So basically, we decided that the big box, which you see there, we would reconstruct it on top of what used to be sort of the very large warehouse that used to be. They used it for keeping grains, and there was a cistern there, an old cistern that we decided to transform it into the new swimming pool of the school. And that basically defined those two big rectangles that you can see in the plan. And then by adding some other elements, we started articulating what we call this relationship between interior rooms and exterior rooms. I have always been very interested in this relationship where the interior and the exterior sort of blurs and are used indistinctively. Obviously, the good weather of Mexico helps a lot, which is not dissimilar to the very good weather we all enjoy here in Los Angeles. Talking about weather, I should say that the Zapopan, or where this place sits, it has a little bit of a more extreme weather, a more extreme condition. It gets hotter in the summer, but it's very rainy in the summer. And then it gets quite cold in the winter. Sometimes there's even a little bit of snow. A few days of the winter, they get a little bit of snow. And many, many mornings, they wake up with temperatures under 0 degrees Celsius, of course. So this project was, also I should say that the spirit of this school is very much about understanding the environment and preserving the environment. So we were sort of engaged, or we were challenged by trying to design a building that would refer to that spirit or to that mission of the school, and where the building would also become sort of a demonstration, like a tool that would demonstrate the opportunities of preserving the environment, or dealing or using alternate energy sources and so forth. Here we have a view from the playing fields that already exist. The long bar became all of the showers and changing rooms. The big box you see in the back became what you understand here in your high schools as the gym, which is a very similar condition, which is a big space that is used for various sporting activities, but also for some social celebrations. And it was all about understanding the possibility of articulating all of those elements. And here you can take a glimpse at the swimming pool, which is one of those outdoor rooms, but still understood as a defined a defined space. And it was all about the articulation, about all of those various elements, and of course some of the other conditions that I will be very happy to explain you very soon. Where we had the best opportunity to sort of investigate the environmental opportunities was precisely here at the gym. Here you see some layering of the materiality that we used, and of course the first thing that we can notice is that we decided to create that clear story, the upper glass part, that would allow us not to have to use any electrical lighting. And this is not only for the money you save in electricity in order not to have to light it during the day, which is when it's basically used, but also it would save us a lot of money in not warming the air by heating, because the lights needed there produce a lot of heat. But I think the most important element that we researched and implemented here was these sort of scales on the building that open and close automatically as they respond to the environmental conditions. So there is a very simple computer. This is very, very low tech, believe me. It's really like a laptop that takes information from some sensors, and the sensors detect, of course, the temperature inside and outside, the wind pressure, the humidity, and various other issues, and give some signals, and with a very, very simple hydraulic system, opens up the scales of the building. So it's basically a building that breathes. You know, that's basically how we wanted to understand it. And so we went to try to learn some issues, both from the scales of certain fish or the feathers of certain birds that do use those elements to sort of control their temperature and wind conditions in the building. So we decided that that would be what would give the expression of the building. So it's a building that basically looks different every time you are there. I have been in various events there. And it's quite amazing to see that it's a building that usually when you get there, it's closed, but as the air starts heating up in the inside, certain parts of the building start opening in order to let some of the hot air go out, but also creating some cross ventilation sometimes. But if it's raining, they close. Or if the wind is blowing from a certain direction, they close from that side. So it's quite interesting how the building changes sort of spontaneously in response to what the environment is sort of creating. These are some views from inside, also referring to the same situation. And here are some views of the bar, of the glass bar that I showed you before, which is where the showers and the changing rooms and also what they call an anaerobic gym is held. And again, the transparency and translucency of this building and continuity of this long building has to do with the convection and dynamic of fluids that allows us to use the vapor or the warm air that has been sort of taken from the shower in the bottom to heat in the winter the upper parts of the gym, and so forth and so forth. And this will lead me to a series of next projects. This is a small house that we have built a few years ago in Mexico City. I should say that I like very much to be involved in residential work. I have found the residential work to give us opportunities that obviously are hard to find in institutional work, where you are working. Here the decisions are made one-to-one. It's a great possibility of experimentation. I'm sure all of my colleagues here will agree with me. So we have always, we keep in our practice at least one or two residential projects going on. This is a house we designed in a very dense area of Mexico City, as you can see by the yellow dot in the aerial photo. It's sort of like a row house condition. It's a series of homes that share or would share walls one with another, and the continuity of the wall of the houses, of the facades, create the street, the public space. It's very close to downtown. It's a very, I would say, lively area of the city. This area has developed into bars and clubs and shops, but also it's a very important residential area. And people living here decided that they wanted to have both. You know, both being in the center of this sort of excitement in the city, but also have the inner peace, the intimacy that a home or a residence should bring to them. And we decided to deal with this problem, with this program, in a very different manner to what all of the surrounding neighbors had done. Basically, and I would explain that very fast, basically all of the houses in the neighborhood, you are required by zoning to utilize only 50% of the land, and you have to leave open another 50%. And that is for reasons of recovery of water into the subsoils, et cetera, and also to keep some greenery within the house. All of the houses, what they do is they build the front part of the lot. Many of the lots are very similar. They're sort of like 2-to-1 or 1-to-2. They decide to build the front part of the lot and leave the back part of the lot empty. We realized that by doing it the other way and bisecting the lot into two longitudinal conditions, we would achieve a lot of issues that wouldn't have not been achieved the other way. First of all, when you build on the upper part, you'd have to put a lot of windows to the street and a lot of windows to the back, or a lot of opening to the back. And then the promiscuity between back and back of the homes became something that wasn't quite acceptable for this condition. So we decided to do it the other way, to put the built part of the house on the north and leave a very long open patio to the south. Therefore, we could have a very opaque house condition to the street that would separate us from the intensity of the urban life, and would allow us to have a very, very tranquil patio. And this is coming back to certain issues of traditions that I will talk to you in a moment, that would be only, that could be completely open, the spaces of the house to that patio, as it would be both a wonderful orientation, but also a very, very intimate condition. And as I started saying, we have been very interested in understanding what are the real solid sort of architectural traditions of our architecture, I mean cultural architecture, and how we can sort of reinvent them and transform them into new opportunities. Here I'm showing an old patio in a 17th or 18th century house in Oaxaca, in comparison with this completely contemporary patio for this very small home in Mexico City. I should also say that this was a very sort of like low budget condition, and therefore we had to start with a very rational structural and material issues that could transform into a very flexible and open situation. Here's a view again from one of the levels of the patio back into the house. Therefore, the house looking south is completely transparent with that louver on the top that differentiates both the quality of intimacy and also the protection from the weather situations. And it's also a very flexible house that can be transformed as the family that occupies the house goes into their various stages of development. The shading, the louvers, is also a very, it's a very traditional way, not only to control the light or to manipulate the light, but also to control the intimacy of the house, as I said before. Here, the public spaces, which are also in the lower part, do not use the louver, but also from the public spaces, because of the louver, you are not able to look into the private spaces that are on top. Here, another condition of these traditional possibilities where a portico, a traditional portico, as you see on your right, becomes a usable outdoor-indoor space on your left, where the house sort of spills and goes through these sort of undefined conditions of space that are both inside and both outside, and where those issues become sort of blurred into one continuous opportunity, which is again a possibility that has very much interested us through our work. Again, a moment of those interstitial conditions, a moment between the actual glass skin of the southern facade of the house into the patio and the louver that has become one of the most used spaces of this small house. And again, its relationship to the outside, again, relationship to the street, to some beautiful jacaranda trees that are always present without having the promiscuity of the life that occurs in the street. We have built many, I would say several houses now, and in recent years we have had the opportunity to being able to work in what I would say this kind of houses, but stacked one on top of the other. We have built recently a series of infill projects in Mexico City. I would say what would be for us mid-rises. In this case, this is like an 8-story building. We're building a couple more currently that relate very much to that same situation. And we have tried to incorporate into these projects many of our learnings from the work we have done for the one-family residential work we've done before. So one of the issues, or some of the issues, has been, again, to understand the opportunity that the various layerings, the layerings of the various materials in various planes gives us in relationship, as I said before, both on the manipulation of light, but also on the control of temperatures and other weather inclemencies, and very, very especially on the opportunities of understanding the public and private condition of the residential possibilities. And this is, of course, to us very important, and it's very much about to see and be seen, what you want to see and what you want to show. And there's a whole bunch of very I would say, fragile and undefined situations that occur within those definitions. So here it's been about, this is of course a developer's project, so I'm also very proud that to be working, for many years I thought never I would be able to work for developers and help developers make money. And I know it may sound very banal, but as I've thought about it, one of the issues that I think is very important is that we as architects, or at least within the, I would say, the cult discourse of architecture, we've also sort of turned our backs to many of the projects, and of course those voids have been taken over by other practitioners. But I would say that I've been having great satisfaction recently in working for this kind of clients, and also knowing that the projects we're designing are making very good money for them. And the reason is because I strongly believe that by doing that and by recuperating or regaining some of the niches of our profession that we have left gone, we are really creating many more opportunities for many of you. You know, the more open our profession becomes, and the more we can infiltrate good architecture, and the more people are willing to pay for good architecture, there will be much better jobs for all of us, including all of you that are in school. And I think that is at the end very, very important. So here it was about defining very, I would say, spaces that could come and be occupied by conditions that we just could not predict. So it was, and this is of course learning from contemporary life in many cities, what it's called loft space, just open space, and understanding why do people appreciate so much that open condition of space. And of course it's because it gives huge flexibility. So we decided to try to create that. And by that you can see in the plan, by bringing together all of the, I would say, fixed conditions that we needed to give to the plan, and then leaving as much of the open opportunities for all of the other spaces that would have to accommodate here. That allowed for a variety of people to want to live in a building like this. And people, of course, we sort of established certain orders from the outside, responding to the both urban and environmental conditions. In this case, you can see to your left, the western facade is screened from the strong western sun. The southern facade is open to a park. Also, this building has a very privileged condition. And by establishing certain orders, we would allow people to do whatever. Of course, not allow them, but that's what it is about. People could do just whatever they wanted in the insides, and at the same time preserving the general orders established within the building. Again, I'll show you some details of the materiality. Again, it's very simple materials. We've always tried to use very, very simple materials. Basically, as I say, materials that you can find at the store in the corner. And in this case, we've used a variety of plastics and polycarbonates to create these screens that do beautiful effects both during the day and during the night, and that also create incredible opportunities inside the building. And some other of the details of the balconies, the views, again, both to the side and to the west. Again, the interstitial spaces that creates these buffers that at the end are those non-program conditions that have become so important in the work. And just some examples of how different people have taken over these apartments and redone them into very, very different conditions of living. And at the end, creating a very interesting community. I should say that this building also has a gallery in the lower two lower floors. This is the entrance to the art gallery. This is the gallery space itself. Some of you will recognize that work. I'm sure Eric will. And this will lead me to another project that we're currently working on. And this is, we have been asked this is an old structure in Mexico City. It's a very late 19th century steel structure, like wrought steel structure, that was built in Mexico City, as I said, at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, to house the Museum of Natural Science or Natural History at the time. And here are some views of the original building in the museum as it was when it was opened, with this huge whale floating in the space. And we have now been asked to transform this building, of course, to fix the building, but also to transform it into a venue for contemporary art. Like it's going to be sort of like a Kunsthal, like not really a museum. It doesn't have a collection, but it's going to be able to house a variety of contemporary work exhibits, and also have some artists in residence, some artist studios. Art will be produced here site-specifically. So it will be a very vital contemporary art institution in Mexico City. Also, I should say, in the northern part of Mexico City, which is a city that has been sort of forgotten for a long time and is really lacking from a lot of the cultural excitement that other parts of the city do have. So here are some views of the existing building. I'm sorry for the quality of these photos, but here you can see the building as it sits today, surrounded by very non-specific conditions. And all of our project was about taking the building, not touching the building, and inserting inside the building a completely new situation. And we have been comparing it with sort of like the whale that used to be hanging there, completely free. You see the whale there, but it's completely free of the existing structure. So we will insert this new building. It's like a building inside a building that would give us both the opportunity to restore the existing building, would give us also the opportunity to build a completely new contemporary condition, but most importantly probably would be the opportunity of creating this tension between the two structures. So here you see the building sort of inserted in the silhouette, in the profile of the existing 19th century building, a section of it, and the opportunity to playing with this new building in creating a variety of indoor-outdoor spaces of the building, where here the outdoor are again indoor because they are enclosed in this sort of envelope that has become the pre-existing condition. The various plans of the building, and the building will be housing two auditoriums, like one auditorium for movies. Movies and video is a very important part of this institution. Lecture halls, of course, exhibit halls, both controlled in temperature, lighting, security, and open spaces for more spontaneous expressions of both performings and visual arts. And here's just some of the initial renderings and opportunities that we have been sort of envisioning, and we are now moving into going ahead with this project. And I've inserted this project here because this is a project that we've been working for about a year here in Los Angeles, and you may recognize this site. This is what people know in West Hollywood as the 9000 building, and it's a building from the 60s that was built on Sunset Boulevard, not far from Doheny. And we have a site that sits right next to it. On your left, you see the site from below, like sort of from above, from the hill, looking down into the basin of Los Angeles. On the right, you see it from below. So we've had to go, and this is where the project is now, to demonstrate that we could achieve a series of recommendations by the zoning plan of the area, basically that deals with corridor views and with some contextual issues that it's very important for the city of West Hollywood, and demonstrate that we really would not do much harm to the city, to what they have, or basically if you see that very thin orange outline is what they envision for the site, that we could achieve even better conditions by doing a taller building in a more massive building, but achieve much better conditions of what they will have if they just enforce the plan that they had envisioned to begin with. So we've gone through a series of demonstrations. The city of West Hollywood has been very good at accepting architecturally the project. They're very excited. We don't know if it's going to go ahead because they're also, of course, and unfortunately more interested in the finances of the project and the revenues that the city will get to the project. And the numbers still don't match to their expectations. But anyway, we're there, and everything has been filed in, and we hope that we will be able to build this project here in the Los Angeles, in the city or the metropolitan area of Los Angeles. And basically, again, it's a project for a developer that has condominiums, a hotel, shops, restaurants, etc. It sits on Sunset Boulevard. Here it's again a transformation of the floor plans, and as we go up, it's like a pinwheel that goes around and starts occupying the various parts of the site in the different conditions until it becomes only a tower that relates to the 9,000 building, and at a moment it becomes a freestanding cube, sort of in a very strange equilibrium, hovering over Sunset, holding a big announcement, a billboard. As you may know, we're only allowed to do one billboard. That's what the zoning allows us. So we decided to do a very big one. And basically it has been about trying to understand the light of Los Angeles, the very vast sky of Los Angeles, the relationship between the basin and the hills. This is, to me, always an interesting photograph or a montage, because we have taken this photo from the balcony of one of the guys that at the beginning was opposing the height of the project because, of course, he was very worried it would block his view. So we were trying to demonstrate that at the end, really we would do the least damage, and we would still keep a very, very important open view into the city, even from his balcony. And this is a view from below, and it's again a series of various layers of transparent and translucent materials that deal very differently with the conditions of light and the conditions of view. This is, again, a view of the billboard. The slab, the upper slab, is where the condominiums are. The lower cube, the hovering cube, is where the hotel would be. The cube, the panels, the translucent panels of the cube are operable, and people, as they come into the hotel, may change their configuration of their views. In the condominium, they're fixed in order to sort of define the terraces and create a second layer that would allow people to express themselves in the inner layer and not in the outer layer of the glass. And this is a view, of course, from Sunset Boulevard. I like it very much because people from my generation, even from an older generation like Eric or Michael, can appreciate, no, I'm kidding, can appreciate building something across the street from the Whiskey A Go-Go that was such a landmark for all of us. And this is just a view, of course, of the pool and the patio inside the project. This is a project I hope I'm doing all right with time. I don't know. Okay, just bear with me a little bit. I'm going not hold you too long. But this is a project we've been working on probably for 6 or 7 years. And it's a very ambitious project in the city of Guadalajara in Mexico. These are 300 hectares, which I don't know how many acres are, but it's a lot of acres. Right at the edge of the city of Guadalajara. You can see here where it's located in relationship to the city. And it really is about bringing to Guadalajara a series of facilities that for complicated reasons have not occurred in Guadalajara for many years. So this is what the city and the clients have now called it, both a cultural and business center. And I have had the great privilege and opportunity to work on this project with 10 colleagues of mine from all over the world. And we have been sort of collaborating both in the creation of the master plan and eventually sort of feeding each other and informing each other as each one of us has moved into the design of one of the various parts of the collaborative master plan. And we have been commissioned and asked to design an exhibition and convention center. So this is what what I want to show you today. And it's been a very fascinating process for us because being an exhibition center or a convention center, it also brought into the program other issues that have not been common or are not common into this kind of buildings. And basically, even though it's such a large site, because of the restrictions of the site and the amount of projects being built on the site, the actual specific site that we were assigned or that we could get our hands hold of is not very large. And therefore, we have had to design a building that typologically usually happens horizontally. We have had to stack the different elements of the buildings. And plus, we had probably the most definitive element of the program is that basically we have had to incorporate an arena. It's not really a sport arena, although it will be able to use as a sports arena, but it's really a place where very huge, very big sort of like rock concerts or that kind of situations where more than 15,000, 18,000 people would get together for a situation like that. And therefore, the only place that we could use that, because of course we couldn't have any columns in the middle of that arena, of that concert hall, had to be at the top of it. And that created a series of challenges. One of them was, of course, a structural challenge, because we had to, at the end, we ended up designing this shell that spans 280 meters by 180 meters. And we were looking really for a condition of huge efficiency for that shell. And I call it shell both because structurally we have looked at it as a shell, but also because of its aesthetics and very specific conditions that I will speak to about them. Also, there were other issues that sort of drove the form of this building. One of them was that we were asked that or one of the restrictions was that we would not be able to use any water from the city. The city would not give us any water. So the challenge was how to recuperate the water that would rain during the rainy season and bring it immediately into a deposit, into a water deposit. And here the challenge is not losing it in evaporation. So we had to also look for a form, a shape in a material that would immediately slide the water without losing any of that water. Another issue was that because, and of course we didn't have a huge budget, we decided that we didn't want to spend the budget in big muscles, in the mechanics of the project, and we went through very thorough research and study with our consultants, and how to reutilize we were forced, like in the two big spaces, like those two first sort of floors in the center is where the exhibit halls are. I should say that the perimeter, the building, is like a 9-story building that sort of rings around the exhibit halls. So because of international conventions, convention standards, we will have to use mechanical cooling and heating for those exhibit spaces. So the whole challenge was how to only use it there and then reutilize all of that energy already spent to heat and cool all of the transitional spaces and also the arena space on the top. And another issue, and I think I could keep on talking about how we ended up with this bubble, was a security issue, and it was about what would happen during a fire, for example. So we had to calculate what to do with all of the smoke, how long it would take for the people to evacuate the building, and where we would store all of that smoke. So we ended up designing around that volume that would go all the way up to the top, allow the people to leave the building, and then the smoke would start coming down. And because it's such a large building, we try to look for a very simple order, which is a series of concentric rings that go from the most opaque ones to the most transparent ones in the outskirts. And that relates both to the program, to the uses, and to the materiality of the building. And that would allow us to create an order that would be both a functional order and a mechanical order, and also an orientation order, in order to be able to circulate and occupy and activate the various conditions of the building. We have been working with light and color in order to define the spaces of the building, and especially the graphics and orientation of the building. Therefore, by utilizing the light spectrum, and that reflects in the programs, in the tickets, in the budgets, in everything, it will be very easy to understand, even though it's sort of like a circular condition, where everything is and where to locate each one of the pieces. And basically that's what this diagram refers to. Here are some views of the various, again, translucent skins, the spaces within the shell, and the first layers of translucency, the color light coming from the various spaces. And this is sort of like what the building does from day to night, and how it goes from being a very sort of shiny, silvery condition into a very translucent, almost transparent situation at night that would allow us sort of to show the intensity or the activities that go on within the building. I should say also that this building is located in, as you saw in the beginning, in a very open land, and it would be sort of have as a backdrop those mountains that is a national park. So it was also about this dialogue or this discourse between the very geometric condition of this bubble and the very organic morphology of the existing mountains, and how to create that very clear discourse in between those two interventions. And it was also about creating an icon that would be seen from very far away, seen from the freeways, recognized, and give sort of like a very simple and direct symbol to the whole complex. This next project, and I will try to go very fast, is a project that unfortunately will not be built because it's a competition we just lost. And it's an addition to the Free Library of Philadelphia. This is just trying to understand what it meant, the amount of volume that we were going to use, and what were all of the opportunities that we could use, and how to define a scheme. And eventually, this is where we ended. We decided that this is where we would put the amount of, basically I should say, that we were asked it was an invited competition, and the library is going to expand with as much space as they already have. So they're going to duplicate their space. And what we decided after studying this condition in urban Philadelphia on what it's called the Benjamin Franklin Mall, which is sort of like a Beaux-Arts mall from the end of the last century, and that's where this Beaux-Arts building sits. We would create a very different condition. We would create what we called an urban room that would belong both to the library and to the city at all. It would be continuous with the park sitting in the front of it, to the side of it. And here's where we started sort of to understanding all the various opportunities and the various elements that would comprise the creation of this room. This is how the building sits in relationship to the existing building. On the left, you see right in front of the circle, two identical buildings. One is the library, one is like a courthouse. And in the back of the library is the site that we were given. So here we see in the left, we see the room, the open room without the cover. On the right, we see it with this sort of inverted L cover. Here, only to show you the complexity of the program. The program is comprised, a library is, as I say, is not anymore a library, but a library now these days sort of does a lot of things, and it's a place of gatherings, and it's a place of entertainment, and it's a place of shopping, and it does many, many things. So the very complex program, this was just to try to understand how we would accommodate in within our scheming, within our concept, the complex program of this unique condition. Part of the challenge was how to revitalize the existing Beaux-Arts building, how to open it up, how to make it more transparent, how to bring new light and new life, really. And we decided to insert a series of light boxes, literally light boxes, that would go both from the new building into the old building and create sort of like a datum that would become not only much more light and much more open, but also new opportunities to reutilize by bringing in new elements, new very contemporary conditions of stacking books and finding books into the Beaux-Arts existing rooms, which some of them, like those two, are quite amazing. And here's where, in this section is where you could better see really what the building is about. What we offered is to create sort of like a sectional loop that would connect the building by creating a first floor that would connect to the parks on both sides through ramps. In the back of the building, right here to your left, would be the new stacks of the new collections and some of the most popular collections. That would be a continuous ramp where collections could grow organically, I would say. The upper part, the beam, would be all of the new technology rooms that, and all of the new functions and new programmatic elements of the program that would connect back to the old library, and through the old library connect to the lower basements, again into the new library, and leave all of the heart of the building completely open to the public. And this is where people would come for outdoor movies, for concerts, for just to spend a day in the shade away from, as part of their day in the park. And of course, they didn't buy it. So I'll show you just some views of the scheme that we submitted. Here's the main space looking back into the new stacks of the library. Again, the whole perimeter would be opaque. It would be completely transparent into the interior, both the floor of the upper bridges and the face of the new component of the library. These are some views looked in within the space. Here is from the ramps, from the new stacks, the reading rooms, again into the space and into that circular patio, which would become a new entrance to the library. The vertical circulations, the elevators, would become screens or backdrops for concerts or whatnot. Here are the stacks, the reading rooms, some of the balconies. And here's in the bridge on top with fantastic views to the city, to both sides of the city. And here's a night view from the park and from the mall. The last project is a project that fortunately we will build, and we're working on now, and hopefully will break ground very soon. And it's a competition we won for the Visual and Performing Arts Library for the Brooklyn Public Library, that of course will be built in downtown Brooklyn. So this is sort of like an idea where it's going to be. This green little thing in the bottom is where it's going to be, and this sort of shows its relationship towards Manhattan and the rest of Brooklyn. This is part of a quite ambitious plan, but that it's now taking off, which is called the BAM for the Brooklyn Academy of Music, a cultural district. And it's about reinventing really downtown Brooklyn, which has gone through a process of deterioration, into a new cultural area for New York. And this is based, of course, on the prestige of a fabulous institution, which is the Brooklyn Academy of Music. This is a view of Brooklyn, and sort of the arrow shows you where it would be, and it's by that tall building, which is known as the Hong Kong Bank. And used to be, I don't know what other bank, but now it's the Hong Kong Bank. This is the site. It's a very, I would say, a complicated site. It's a triangular piece of land, which is not dissimilar to various other opportunities that occur both in Manhattan and in other boroughs. And as you well understand, they occur where diagonals sort of intersect the very strict grids. Here it not only intersects the grids, but the diagonal also shifts into a different grid, creating a very interesting sort of conjunction of geometries in this part of Brooklyn. This is BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, which will be our neighbor. And I should only say that the building sits within, again, a very intense urban condition, surrounded by very important communication hubs, transportation hubs, both trains, subways, buses, and right on Flatbush Avenue, which used to be probably the most important street connecting Manhattan to the Hamptons. And when the highways were built, Flatbush went into a very important process of deterioration, and that's where we are now, and where Brooklyn is trying to reinvent itself by recuperating a very rich infrastructure. The program, again, and not dissimilar to the previous project, is a very complicated and very ambitious and very intense program. And basically here the challenge was that once we started understanding the program, we realized that with the height restrictions and the FAR, what they call the FAR, I guess it's called here the same, the amount of square feet that you could build on that site in the program, basically we had to build everything in order to comply with what we were giving by the program. So we encountered that the opportunities of sort of doing more than just filling in the program were very limited. And we started understanding, and this is where another issue that I think, and maybe I have not referred long enough during this talk, but it's been this interest of understanding the relationship between the envelope and the program itself. The program in this case, and that's why I like very much this picture, the program being all of these organs that sort of keep this animal alive, and this envelope that has other functions, but as we see, creates some opportunities, some very few opportunities, against some interstitial conditions that lay in within the envelope or the skin and the program itself, the organs themselves. And that's how we started to understand what were the opportunities of really using those very, very few moments to create certain connections and certain excitement within the building by just sort of sliding and pushing around very, very slightly the programmatic conditions that we were giving. A big thing was how to create a heart to the building, even though we had all of this stacking to do a lot of the building, and I would say that half of the building on top of this void here are basically offices and curatorial spaces and research spaces, and the rest are really the public spaces. So a big challenge was how to create this heart where, although the two functions, the very public and the very private, never meet physically, they could still meet spatially. Also would give us an opportunity to bring light to the basements where we had located the auditoriums, the black box, other of those performing arts spaces, and how to bring light at least to the public, like to the vestibules of this area. We also decided that we would clearly differentiate the circulations and the entrances of those two capacities of the building. We would enter through the tip to your right into the most private conditions of the building. We would enter through the left by creating this very special space into the most public conditions of the building. And then all of those circulations, although never touching each other, would sort of meet in the center. We also tried to look for opportunities to opening up the building into various urban conditions. Basically, we decided to create at the left of the building, as you can see in the upper plan to your left, a space, a urban space that is also the stairs going up to the library, but would also be a place for spontaneous performances like a small concert, a movie when the weather permits, a street performance, and also a place for people just to gather, to have lunch, and to have another opportunity of a small urban space that would recognize the conditions of downtown Brooklyn. The plans change as they go up. They're very different from one another. Well, here's a section taken through that space. And some photos of the model. Here we see the model, both the tip and the back. The back creates also that sort of big gate that brings us into that space and eventually into the BAM. There was also a challenge on how to bring BAM back to Flatbush Avenue. Here are photos both from the tip and from the back. I should also say that all of the exterior walls would be translucent with very, very small and identified punctuations, but all of the heart of the building would be completely transparent into that one and unique space. So that space, the circulations of the building also become balconies into that urban space. They're all transparent as the exterior walls are translucent and would help us to control both the incidence of light for the collection of the library and also allow us to have a variety of projections and hopefully, if we can afford, conditions of data transmitted through the skin of the building and therefore have a building that changes and adapts to the various conditions of the programming. Here, again, just an animation on how the building changes from day to night and how it becomes more transparent, some possibilities of movement through movies or through slides or whatever could occur there. This is the renderings that we submitted for the competition. And with this, I thank you very much.